I'll begin my speech with a poem. Innocence in the mind, not knowing where to go. What, how, why are questions unknown. A path ahead with no friends, no foe. Blooms the flower, relives the cocoon. The nature sings. When a ray falls upon the dew, the butterfly spreads its wings. Sisters and brothers of the TED Talk community, thank you for giving me the honor to present my thoughts on climate change. I'm no expert and definitely not a laureate on the subject. I'm a consumer, just like all of us here, a human born 28 years ago, and will live on for another while, hoping to pass on the legacy that my previous generation gifted me with. I'm a concerned citizen, one of the billions out there who wants to contribute to the issue of climate crisis. I'm someone who loves fiction. Somehow, the world has for a time looked at the issue of climate change as if it were fiction. As a little girl, I used to shut my eyes and pretend that not seeing things would somehow make it go away. But we know better than that. The issue of climate change is more of a question of science rather than a global issue. Dealing with the problem, therefore, involves individual with socio-cultural perspective. And somehow, to tackle the climate change topic, the education of sustainability becomes significant. Why? In order to make the society aware and in order to improve the society's behavior and attitude towards the resources. This is where the culture plays a vital role as a non-renewable resource, because culture enables environmental sustainability. Let's interlink cultural diversity with biodiversity. Let's talk about the influence on consumption patterns or the contribution towards sustainable environmental management practices as a result of the local and traditional knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam says, Jivo Jivatsya Jivanam. Every living element is interconnected. The weak is the subsistence of the strong. One living being is food for another. The supreme will holds that in order to sustain and in order to survive, one has to depend on the systematic law of subsistence, where the weak sustains the strong. The cycle continues. Men will be born, will go back to the soil, nature will generate and regenerate, produce and reproduce. Nature will feed on nature in order to survive and go on. The law of subsistence is interlinked with the Darwinian theory of the survival of the fittest. Something about Indian rituals has always been environment-centric. Let's talk about the practice of sacred groves. It's found in the Western Ghats of Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Maharashtra. These are essential repositories of floral and faunal diversity that has been conserved by the local communities in a sustainable manner. These efforts, they not only highlight the community managed conservation efforts, but also they offer the potential for carbon sequestration. Also, we have the examples of sacred ponds, which are found attached in the old temple premises. They are a typical example of protecting the several endangered species and house rich biodiversity. Of course, there's a Bishnoi community, which is found in the Western Thar Desert. They follow the tenets of conserving biodiversity. For them, harming the environment would mean harming themselves. The Khejri tree conservation in Rajasthan. So Khejri tree is known for its moisture retention, and they are not axed even when it comes to construction. The live example can be seen in Salasa Balaji temple in the Sikar district of Rajasthan. Of course, there's a traditional rainwater harvesting system found in many parts of India, depending on the topography and climate and rain in that region. The common examples we may be knowing is stepwells in Gujarat, the tanks of Tamil Nadu, the Johads in Rajasthan, and the Zabo system of Nagaland. When it comes to food, respecting food has always been a part of our lifestyle. Indian recipes such as chutneys, dal parathas, khakra, curd rice, these are perfect examples of recycling the leftover food. The indigenous cooking techniques of making pickles, sun drying techniques for making papad, hand grinding or hand churning for chutney and paste. These are ways of sustainable management and conservation. Let me tell you a story from the Indian folklore. There is the story of King Venu and King Prithu that revolves around the concept of sustainability. So King Venu exploited the earth a lot, and somehow the earth took the form of a cow. She later went to the Saptarishis to complain of her plight of being exploited by the king. The Saptarishis were enraged, so enraged that they decided to kill the king and churn out his arms. From the death of King Venu was born King Prithu. He was way more sustainable, nature friendly, and earth loving. So King Prithu adopts Prithvi as his daughter. Prithu's daughter becomes Prithvi. So the story somehow sums up referring to kings as civilization who shall use the resources to recreate and replenish them instead of exploiting them. The circle of sustainability. So the nature is all about use and reuse. The moment you cross the threshold and start exploiting, the end is near. So what is sustainable lifestyle? We rethink our ways of living. We have to rethink how we buy. We have to rethink how we organize our everyday life. It's about altering how we socialize, how we exchange ideas, how we share, educate, or build identities. It means we have to transform our societies. We have to live in harmony with the natural environment. As a citizen, at home or at work, many of our choices. Let's talk about energy usage. Let's talk about transport or food or wastage or community or contributing towards building a sustainable lifestyle. A vision of the sustainable development with three dimensions, namely economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental balance, was consolidated at the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit of 1992 as a paradigm of sustainable development. However, it is believed that these dimensions alone cannot possibly reflect the current complexity of the society. So there is now a call from the agencies such as UNESCO or the World Summit on Sustainable Development to include culture. So culture is emerging as the fourth pillar in this model. Sustainable development equals to environment plus economy plus social plus culture. Culture is both an instrument for decision making and implementation, also a result of the policies and decisions we are supposed to implement. Culture is about creativity. It's about heritage. It's about knowledge. It's about diversity. There were times when there were no air conditioners. We spent our summers, evenings and nights often stargazing on the terraces or courtyards or balconies, listening to old folklores. I remember my auntie spreading a wet cotton sheet on the heated floors to cool it off. I remember the earthen pots that used to store water to give it a natural coolness. Hand washing and sun drying techniques, they were a part and parcel of our lives. These indigenous techniques of switching back to hand washing the dishes instead of using a dishwasher, or washing the clothes and sun drying them instead of using the tumblers, they can save a lot on energy, water consumption, as well as protect the nature from the harm caused by these chemical detergents. We Indians have a tropical climate. The traditional textile weaving with a weaving loom, they never demand any sort of energy or electricity or exceptional skills or fossil fuel. Our rich Indian heritage talks about exceptional fabrics of Kanjivaram, Kalamkari, Zardozi, tie and dye technology, all these organic and natural dyes. So production of 1 meter khadi fabric consumes around 3 liters of water. However, 55 liters is consumed in a traditional textile mill. Let's note that a hand-woven fabric has the smallest carbon footprint. Let us give our way back to cotton, cotton towels, cotton kerchiefs, instead of using and throwing these tissue papers, which, let me remind you, not only have a heavy reliance on timber, but also causes pollution such as that of air and water. Biodiversity loss and change in climate added to the unsustainable resource management are somehow triggering nature, pushing them towards the breaking point. What's the breaking point here? The threshold of usage versus exploitation. The United Nations Environment Programme believes that we need to protect, we need to preserve, we need to promote the traditional knowledge, the customary sustainable usage, and the expertise of indigenous communities if we wish to stop the damage. Even experts agree that it is centuries of tradition, the knowledge that still prevails in the community, that the nature is sacred. It ensures the equilibrium in the environment that has not only given birth to you and me, but also lets us thrive and survive. My good friend noted how we throw things, the garbage or debris, to make our house cleaner outside. So is nature a part of the outside? Let's take a pregnant pause here. Let's think. Let's rethink. Nenquimo, the leader of Ecuador's indigenous people, comments that as indigenous people, they know why the climate is changing and thereby damaging and destroying the planet. So if we allow Amazon to be destroyed, that affects the indigenous people as much as it affects everyone because of the climate change. The mythological tales of Ram and Sita, where Sita was the daughter of Earth, also named as Vandevi, the goddess of forests. She is nature. While Maryada Purushottam Ram, the man of order, played the role of king who maintains order and pace for nature, for the mankind and its survival. So every living matter is somehow interconnected with the nature. Every element in our body and living soul is believed to originate from Mother Earth, the way it mixes back to the very soil, to the very air. Walking along the ghats in Varanasi, I was mesmerized by the evening aarti and the beautiful Ganga. Some believe death here is equivalent to attaining moksha or salvation, the ultimate release from the cycle of births and rebirths. It reminds me the tale of Siddhartha transforming into Gautam Buddha upon attaining enlightenment under the infamous people tree. And then there's the infamous story of Krishna's birth and how his father Vasudev carries the baby through the mighty river Yamuna to drop him safely at Gokul. However, when I get to learn about the devastating state of the holy river, or Varanasi's Manikarnika Ghat, where hundreds of bodies are cremated every day, and most of them are left half burned, thrown into the sacred river of Ganga, it makes me wonder. One of the messages in Gita highlights the practice of philosophy, conserve energy or perish. The circle of sustainability, you see. The Vedic culture stresses that nature is an inherent and indispensable part. One of the very basic concepts of Vedic culture is the concept of Panchabhutas, the 5 elements of nature: the earth, that is the soil, the water, the air, the fire, and the space. The idea, when summed up, is entirely purely environmental. The Vedic culture is Aranyak, a culture of nature. You learn everything from nature. Some of the fundamental principles of ecology, the interrelationship and interdependence of all life, were conceptualized in the Indian ethos, and they were reflected in the ancient scriptural text, the Ishopanishad, over 2000 years ago. It says, and I quote, "The universe is a creation of the supreme power meant for the benefit of all his creation. Each individual life form must therefore learn to enjoy its benefits by forming a part of the system in close relationship with other species." In fact, the oldest visual image of the human fascination towards the love of nature in India can be found in the 10,000-year-old cave painting at Bhimbetka in central India. Of course, there's the Indus Valley civilization that provides enough evidence of human interest in wildlife. Classical Indian myth is replete with the similes of man in unison with the environment. Many of the rituals, which to the modern society may seem meaningless and superstitious, were traditional strategies to preserve the intrinsic relationship between man and the nature. The worship of trees or animals, of forests, rivers, and the sun, or let's consider treating Earth itself as Mother Goddess, were all part of the Indian tradition, still are. Rigveda first mandala says, "Madhu vata ritayate, madhu ksharanti sindhava, madhvirna santoshadhi." It means environment provides bliss to people, leading their lives perfectly. Rivers, they bless us with sacred water and provides us health and vegetation. Sun blesses with a peaceful life. Nature believes in wheels and successions, in the concept of give and take, in the balance of birth and rebirth, creation and destruction. When you create, you're bound to destroy, and vice versa. Ancient mythology relates stories of women primarily associated with forests and natures, while that of man with the township. While man tries to control the nature, it is stressed to respect and harmonize the importance of nature. There is a threshold point. One needs to take care of her needs as well. You treat her well, and the results will be bountiful. You will exploit it, and you will end up starving. The goddesses in the Vedic culture depicted nature as well. Let's take the example of Sita from Ramayana. There was a point up to which she suffered. The moment she was poorly treated, she puts an end to it and goes back to the earth. The message is pretty clear. Treat her gently, and you shall be rewarded with greenery and bounty. Disrespect, and you shall perish. Let us understand that Mother Nature wants us to nourish her. Forests are hearty enough to accommodate our needs, as long as we know the breaking point. Let us understand that we consume nature, and therefore we have to grow and nurture it as a part of our family. Let us expand the horizon. Let us see beyond what we usually see. Let us open the gates a little bit wider and accommodate nature in our home. Let's not treat it as outside. Let's count it in. With this, I will conclude my speech with a poem. It is the sun that shines on us, the fire deep within, the air we breathe, or the water in us, the mighty, mighty sky blanketing us, and the earth we go back to, the green that surrounds us, and the rivers looking up to us. It is the mountains guarding us, the warmth we call home. All that is ours was once theirs. All that is ours will be theirs. The past that gave us birth will be the tomorrows taken from us. It is our duty to preserve, to conserve, and pass on the legacy as we serve. For the butterfly spread its wings and flew her share of sky. It is time to go back to the cocoon and let nature survive. Thank you.